Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Ambassadors, Julia, thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Alan Lynch. I'm a detective sergeant in the Irish Police Force. It's called An Garda Síochána in Irish. And my role in my unit is the Human Trafficking Investigation and Coordination Unit. And basically what we do is we investigate and we coordinate human trafficking incidents all around the whole country of Ireland, and also we work with our colleagues across Europe. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about just human trafficking and in Ireland and what Ireland has done to combat sexual exploitation, and I'm going to go through a live case. So the details will be very sparse because it's a Latvian case. It's a case that Ireland are dealing with Latvia at the moment. Just for clarity, we have two ongoing cases with Latvia. We've one JIT, it's a Joint Investigation Team, and that is for labour exploitation. And in that case with Latvia, we have 3 Latvian individuals in custody in Ireland on human trafficking charges for labour exploitation. That's been dealt with by colleagues of mine, but also by colleagues in the room. So the case I'm going to deal with today will be regarding the theme of the conference and the theme of the agenda, and that is going to be in relation to sexual exploitation. What the eye doesn't see and the mind doesn't know doesn't exist. In Ireland, we have an awareness campaign at the minute, and it's called Hidden and in Plain Sight. And I think that is the theme basically of what all my previous speakers have said regarding sexual exploitation. It's hidden, but it's in plain sight. It's there, it's behind closed door. What we don't see, the mind doesn't know. So until the likes of Centres Marta and other awareness campaigns, and us in the police and other government organisations, until we start running out these awareness campaigns, educating people, letting people know that things might not always be right, then we are in deep trouble. So human trafficking is a crime against humanity. It's the trade of people, and as Kevin recently said earlier, in the UK it's known as the modern day slavery, and that's what it is. You can look at it any different form. It's slavery, modern day slavery, and it's the violation of the human rights of an individual. In Ireland and across Europe, it's defined under these 3 pillars. If we look at the UN protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplemented the UN Convention against transnational organised crime. So just for a little bit of guidance on it, for somebody to be deemed a victim of human trafficking in Ireland, they must meet one of each of these 3 pillars. So they must either be recruited, transported, transferred, harboured or received. Normally they're recruited. If we look at sexual exploitation, we look at human trafficking, normally they are recruited. They're recruited on social media, they're recruited in their hometowns in different ways. Then the means has there's a threat, there's use of force, coercion. I know coercion was spoken earlier on by our colleagues in the Netherlands. Coercion is a massive part of it. Abduction, not so much nowadays, years ago maybe. Fraud, deception. Next, abuse of power, vulnerability. Any of these women that are exploited in sexual exploitation, it's their abuse of their power, and they're coming from vulnerable positions and basically receiving of payments or benefits. And then it goes to the purpose. And what's the purpose? And it's normally the exploitation, and it's exploitation, prostitution, sexual exploitation, forced labour, slavery or similar practices, removal of organs, or other types of exploitation. The other types, forced criminality, we would see a lot in Ireland, more so in the Vietnamese community, and we would see a lot of victims ending up in grow houses, or we have a lot of young ladies and young women in begging, forced begging around the streets of Ireland. And I think around the streets of Europe we can see that it's a common practice. So that's what it's defined as. And for us to look at a case of human trafficking, we must look at these. And once we can tick one of those boxes, in sexual exploitation they can be ticked in 2 minutes. We can see a victim of sexual exploitation. They've normally been recruited They've been threatened, definitely. They've been deceived. They're vulnerable, and they're exploitation. They're vulnerable they're exploited for sexual exploitation. So the different types. So for sexual, it's street prostitution, brothels, massage parlours, escort agencies, internet, hotel rooms. Labour exploitation is very important. I know we're talking about sexual exploitation, but women can be exploited in the labour market as well. We have a number of cases, ongoing cases in Ireland, that we have women who've come from India, Pakistan, other places to work in the healthcare industry, to work in restaurants, and they've been exploited. And part of their exploitation is not only their deduction of their wages and where they're living and stuff like that, it also becomes the sexual exploitation in the workplace. So not only are they, after being brought over here, huge debt, they have to repay all these debts, their families are in big debt, they're working for less than minimum wage, living in squalor. When they go into the workplace, then they get further exploited when they're working with other males, and they get exploited there. So it's important to remember that for labour exploitation and also forced criminality, drug offences, I'm going to refer back to that in a few minutes, of how forced criminality can come on relating to drug offences and young women. Pickpocketing, benefit fraud, forced marriage. Forced marriage is a massive part, and it's something we have seen with our experience with Centres Marta, and it actually forms part of our case. The background to it is a forced marriage, where young ladies in Latvia were brought for better lives somewhere else and promised, if they enter into these marriages, or a better life. So we've heard from other colleagues and previous speakers regarding the national response, and we had a good response. And I know the previous speaker regarding the different services. So in Ireland, so if a person meets that criteria and we deem them a victim of human trafficking, these are the following services that they're immediately, from that moment in time, entitled to. Legal aid board, they get free legal advice, they get access to a solicitor straight away. They then get the services of an NGO and an anti-human trafficking team, social worker. So there's a designated department in the social work department, and they will get social work, an actual social worker assigned to them. They will get social welfare payments. They'll get free medical aid. They get all the supports surrounding social work. GNIB stands for the Garda National Immigration Bureau, and we know that immigration is a massive thing in Europe at the minute, and migrants are fleeing different various countries, and our own governments and different governments have different ways on it, and that is a big form of concern for victims, and that's the first thing we do. Don't worry, you are not going to be removed, and there's what's called a do not remove stamp put on their immigration status. They're not to be removed from the country. So now they know that they're safe, they have support. They can't go, they're not going to be, sent to home, they're not going to be sent anywhere. The next day, they get a crime prevention officer. So that's a member of the police in Ireland will go and visit them and discuss with them, because one of the biggest problems we have with victims of trafficking is they get re-trafficked, and they get settled somewhere, and somebody will come on them and try and help them, pretend to help them, but they get re-trafficked. So we give them advice, and they get crime prevention advice. And accommodation. Now accommodation, I don't know what Latvia is like at the minute, but Ireland, it's a crisis point. And it's a huge issue. But it's their legal requirement for a victim of trafficking in Ireland to have accommodation. So we must remove that person. Once we meet them and deem them a victim, we remove them from the situation they're in, and we bring them to a place of safety. And that's somewhere, unfortunately at the minute, we don't have specific accommodation services for victims of human trafficking. I know in the Netherlands, I think there's a centre, just from my experience, I'm trying to think, some countries around Europe have designated male and female centres for women. Unfortunately in Ireland, some of these victims end up in migrant centres, because that's the only accommodation that we have for them. But at least we can monitor them, we make them safe, they have all the services. So that's the national response and the Irish national response. Is it enough? I don't know. I don't think so. We are now in today, as the ambassador, Irish ambassador earlier mentioned, we are now, the third national action plan is before our government at the minute, and there's different services where at the minute for a person to be identified as a victim in Ireland of human trafficking, it must be a member of my team or a member of the police that will identify them as that victim. That's not always good practice. So now we are engaging with outside agencies and agencies like the equivalent of St. Marta in Ireland, Ruhama, the health service, all different group of body will come together now, and they will now assess the victim. So we are changing and we are responding to it. Just on the statistics, and you know, it's no surprise from what we've spoken about and what's been spoken all day today that the female and male, there's 33. They're identified victims of human trafficking in Ireland this year. So there's 33 females and 15 males, and in children there's 6 female children and 1 male. So again, you can see predominantly it's more females, and I only have a short time. I can show loads of charts regarding, but of that 33, I would imagine 30, if not 29, are all sexual exploitation. So the Irish approach to protecting victims of sexual exploitation. So in 2017, we adopted the Nordic model, and it was brought into law under the Sexual Offences Act, and it was introduced to reduce the trafficking of women for sexual exploitation. And the overall aim was to eliminate sex work. The model, as we know and we spoke about earlier, decriminalises the buyers of sex and in turn decriminalises the sex workers. We know it's not without its problems, and there's various issues for it, but I think it's the only way forward. I think it's the only way that we can protect these ladies in this industry. Overnight, it stopped street prostitution in Ireland. So the hub areas, we've seen it in the UK and other areas around Europe, the red light districts, girls on the street, they've no protection, So we've seen that, but now it's put it into different light. So it puts girls working in Airbnbs, long-term lets, hotel rooms, apartments. So what that has done, unfortunately then, it has opened the door to OCGs. So OCG is an organised crime gang or an organised crime group. And these people operate these gangs or groups like business models. And the commodity is the female. And that's it. And it's, Kevin referred to earlier on, it's a $1 billion industry. And these OCGs, they can now control the women because they control where they're going, can control where they're working from. So that's what it has opened the doors for them. Demand. So we spoke about it earlier on, it's been spoken about education and it's been spoken about. We had a meeting yesterday, and at quarter to 3 yesterday I went onto my phone. There was 852 escorts advertising on a Wednesday afternoon in Ireland yesterday. Okay, that's 852 girls offering sexual services. Ireland is very similar to Latvia. You know, we're small countries. If there's 852 girls advertising on a quiet Wednesday, what amount are we looking at on a Friday, Saturday, if there's a big event on, if there's a rugby match on or a soccer match on? The demand goes up. And when you have that demand, it means that the men are going out there. And this is the message that we're trying, and awareness campaigns, is to get across. I said it yesterday also, the busiest times, people will not believe this, that the busiest times, and this is from Ruhama, as I said, work like St. Marta, they've done the research with victims. 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock during the day, and 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening. So these are not men coming from pubs and public houses. Now I know that happens as well, but this is the men, these are educated men, probably businessmen coming out, spending 150 to 400 euro on average. This is the kind of money that's been spread. So if that's there, this is where we run into problems for these girls, because the demand is there. So of course these gangs are going to, and these girls are going to be put back and back and back. I have a bit of an issue with our drugs units in Ireland. Again, I refer to Kevin. 100 billion on human, or for the amount of money that's spent on tackling drugs across Europe. Ireland's the same. Our drugs guys get a big catchment, get a big seizure of cocaine. It's on every newspaper. Press release. They're on the news. Big table, guns, drugs, everything. Brilliant. Oh, really good, you know. Our drugs units have maybe a sergeant and 12, 15 guards over 5 teams for the national unit. I've got 1 and 4 on my team. My colleagues I know from Latvia, because we say the same people, we're dealing with the same cases, Ireland and Latvia. That's the resources that our countries, and this is not just these 2 countries, this is European-wide. The money is not being put into it. If you get that drug seizure, and you have that drug seizure, and you have it in the paper and everything, it's gone. It's flushed down the toilet, whatever. A woman who's a victim of human trafficking, she can be used over and over and over and over again. So her worth, once them drugs are gone on the drugs industry, they're gone. But a woman that's involved in sexual exploitation, she's going to be continually exploited until somebody mentioned earlier, until she's broken mentally and physically and she's just moved on. So these are the areas we have to look at. So I know there's different objectives for different governments and different parliamentarians. We as a unit in where I work is victim based, and we must look at the victim. So what we do is, in Ireland, we do welfare checks on all. So we ring up those 852 numbers over the course of the year, whatever it is, we randomly pick, and we'll make appointments and we'll go and see these ladies. So once we get to the door, one of my team will pretend to be making an appointment, a female will come right in behind, and what we've been trying to do recently is bring health service workers, bring NGOs with us on these, so that we can build a rapport. Because you have to understand, some, especially coming from South America, these women will not trust the police. They don't want to talk to the police. So we have to get that across. So that's why we bring these. So we leave these cards. So I don't know, I left these cards on the table earlier on. I don't know if anybody's seen them. They're just different ways. So we slip these cards into their bags, into their pockets. They can stuff them into their underwear, get them, because if we leave our business cards, we all have the white business cards, our phone numbers, or their names, and so if somebody finds that, what are you doing talking to him? Why are you talking to him? These have a QR code, and on that QR code brings them to a website called Blue Blindfold. We run that. It's a confidential website for targeting or for reporting human trafficking. So that's just one thing. We try different things. I know St. Martin have tried before with in the airports and the backs of doors and stuff like that, different phone numbers. We're continually trying to change different ways. That's just one thing. We liaise with government and non-government agencies, European and international law enforcement agencies. We try and develop our own training. We know our own police force, a separate case completely, but for drug importation, one certain drugs team put a guy in prison for 4 months. 4 months later, they realised that guy could have been a victim of human trafficking. I went down and interviewed him. After 5 minutes, I knew he was a victim. I had to then work on getting him out. We've had Vietnamese ladies spend 1.5 years in prisons in Ireland for drug trafficking offences. They've received huge payments, settlement payments afterwards from the courts because they were victims of trafficking. But nobody ever thought, they just seen the drugs, nobody ever thought to see what was her background. So that's training for our own members. And then online monitoring. So these internet sites that I mentioned here, we monitor them continually and continually. I don't have enough time to go into it, but there's a big research then regarding what we spoke to earlier on to some colleagues, allowing that website to continue. It's operating nearly illegally, but at the same time, we can monitor the girl. We know where they are. There's phone numbers. There's huge evidential basis on it. So that's another part of it. And then obviously the ethics of concern is under 18 years of age. And unfortunately, that is an advertisement in itself, that people are advertising girls that look under 18. I spoke at dinner last night with a Ukrainian colleague. They were advertising when the war started. They were advertising the website for Ukrainian ladies. Live your war fantasy. We immediately contacted them and they took that down. So that's why it's hard to fathom what's right and what's wrong. I know I'm pressed for time. I won't go into it, but the Istanbul Convention, Ireland did ratify it, and the ambassador mentioned it earlier on, and that's regarding our own implementation. And I just think that the domestic abuse risk evaluation tool, the RET, was implemented following that. But that took a good piece of work to get that in. Ireland were a little bit late to the table, but that is a really good thing now. And regarding the victims, I know the electric tagging is in some countries. We have special phones that they just have to hit one button, it goes straight to our control centre, and that's the same as a murder call, a robbery call or anything. So we're still not there, but we're getting there on that respect. So this is our Irish-Latvian investigation. Okay, so this is there's no other terms to this. This is a tragic case. And this came from Sanchez Marta. And it was a letter in 2020 that came into our office. And again, a little bit on our side as well, and I know we spoke about it, the delay in this, but there was due process for this delay, but it wasn't really looked at. When I came into the office, it was handed to me and it was written off. And I said, that can't be written off. So the basis is, there was a girl, a Latvian girl, and she was in prison in Morocco. And she was serving a 7-year prison term. 7 years in a prison in Morocco for drug trafficking. And she, after a number of years, obviously, of reflection and sitting in that prison in horrendous circumstances, realised that she possibly was a victim of human trafficking. And she reached out to Sanchez Marta. And through her mum, she wrote to Sanchez Marta. And Sanchez Marta wrote to ourselves and the Police Service of Northern Ireland, the PSNI. And it was sent to us. So the background of this case, briefly, is that this lady was out socialising with her friend in a small town in Latvia in 2015. And she was introduced to a man who promised her a better life. She was a vulnerable young girl, struggling a little bit with alcohol and drug addiction. And the thoughts of managing a shop in Ireland seemed to be, And overnight, they packed bags, went to their families. One girl left her daughter behind to say, I'm going to better myself. I'm going to get this shop. I'll bring my daughter home over to Ireland after. We'll have this better life. By the time they got off the boat in Ireland, they were both told there'd be no shop. You'd be working for me as prostitutes in Ireland. Both sides of the border. So one of the victims immediately was put into prostitution. On their arrival in Ireland, were put into a house. Pictures were taken of them in lingerie and they were put on the internet. Another form of sexual exploitation in this case is the second victim. Her fear of going into prostitution was so great that she entered into a relationship with this individual, Latvian man. That was so she wouldn't have to go into prostitution. And as part of our prosecution, we are looking at charges for sexual exploitation. She didn't want to go into a sexual relationship with this man, but she did it out of not having to go into prostitution. So this exploitation lasted for 6 to 8 months, and the trafficker then lured both of these victims separately on 2 separate occasions, offering them a chance to make other money and to leave and get into a sham marriage. And they were brought across Europe and across to South America. Where this is on a return journey, one of the victims ended up getting stopped in Morocco, carrying a substantial amount of cocaine in her suitcase that she didn't know anything about, and ended up serving her sentence. At this stage, it was too late for anyone. We tried, the Latvian police and my colleagues here had tried, Ireland tried, we assisted the service of the NCA in the UK to try and speak to the Moroccan police. It was really, really difficult. And as Yoletta knows, we were trying. I was writing to Sanchez Marta, but unfortunately, until we had a statement from this lady, we couldn't do anything. She was released last year, and immediately the Latvian police took 4 statements from her over a period of time. We flew to Latvia in April of this year, myself and my colleague, and we interviewed her in the next building here, in the State Police building, over 5 or 6 hours. A really, really good statement, a really good person who's after coming through and will make a really, really good witness. The second witness has also, she also, in her journey, she was stopped in the UK, and she stopped having ingested 12 capsules of cocaine inside her. So she had to be taken to hospital and let these pass. She was then sentenced in the UK overnight to 3 years. She served 1.5 years and she was released. I was 6 months trying to get the file from the UK. This is nothing with our UK colleagues because we have a really, really good relationship. It was trying to find out where it was, what it was, and then it met a little bit of redress because our Latvian colleagues and us knew the background to it. So it probably, again, like all of our cases and cases, other drug cases in Ireland, it wasn't seen at the time as a trafficking case. But we had all the evidence now, and we now have it. So this lady has also given 2 statements to the Latvian police and has agreed for the prosecution. One of the victims came to Ireland in August this year, and we took her partner, and they were in a hotel for 3 days, and we brought them all around Ireland and the UK. She was able to identify all the houses that she was in, places she was exploited. She even identified a new place that wasn't even on our radar. it was a difficult journey for her. So we had offered services of our local NGOs and stuff like that to help her. But she was strong, and it brought her, she knew, and they know now that we are working for them. Both organisations are working for them. So we look at it as we spoke earlier on, the coercive control. This man coercively controlled these victims. They didn't know, they didn't have any of their own rights at all. They were under the control of the trafficker. Every element of them was controlled by him. Once they left Latvia, the language barrier, the passports were taken off them, they had no money, they had nothing. They had no access even to hygiene products. The suspect in this case had a background of domestic violence. He was married to a Latvian lady, has 2 children, and they all moved to Ireland. She left him and she has protection orders and restraining orders against him. Then he moved on to another girl, Latvian girl, in Ireland. She had 2 children. She currently has charges before the court for him for assault and for domestic violence charges. So it's a repeated history of this gentleman. So the police inquiries, just to show you how such an investigation goes, and this is, I'm not saying this is small, but this is a tighter one in that the movements are tight, the dates are tight. Sexual exploitation cases, they could be 2 years long. These girls could be 2 years being moved around country to country to country. So this was, I'm going to say, a neater case. We were dealing with Latvia, the UK, the PSNI and the Moroccan police forces. Europol, Eurojust and Interpol all looked at it. NGOs, Centres Marta, our own NGOs in Ireland. Gardaí ourselves had to come to Latvia. Latvian police, in a similar case, came to Ireland. But this is what has to happen in these cases. The coordination meeting had to go to The Hague. So with colleagues from Latvia and the prosecutors, and the Irish prosecutors and ourselves, we all went to Latvia, or we all went to The Hague, where we sat down. We took all the witness statements, court orders for social media accounts, court orders for bank accounts, revenue checks, airline companies, ferry companies. Unfortunately, in Ireland, and that's one of the things I'll go on to now, and I know I'm tight for time, is we go back to the witness. Unfortunately, in Ireland, for that type of a case, we need all that evidence, and we have to have all that evidence, or our prosecutor won't bring it before the courts. There's no chance. So to get this, we have to have achieving best evidence. I took off Kevin's slide earlier on, and that's what you need to do. The good relationship that we have, Tatiana and our colleagues in the UK, Vadim's, we were able to talk, we were able to share the intelligence, we were able to put the case together, we were able to bring it to Europe. But then we have to bear in mind the witness. In Ireland, we have to put that witness into the witness box. So she sits up here in this box. You have your judge and jury. But sitting here beside her could be the suspect in the case. And that itself, we have seen cases that the victims got absolutely destroyed in the box. Their lives torn asunder. Every bit of their lives. You came here to Ireland, you knew you were going to work as a prostitute. You knew this. Instagram page. Oh, look at you here down in Cork. You're having a great time. She might have got out for an hour that day and put a profile picture up to Instagram to tell her family back in Brazil, life is good, this is Ireland, it's brilliant. 2 years later, that picture is put up in a courtroom in front of everyone. You're having a great time in Cork here. The previous 12 hours of that day, she could have been locked up working in sexual exploitation. They're the things we have to look at. We also have had to change our tact, per se, in how we investigate these things. Because we have a duty of care in the victim. And we knowingly are going to put that victim in the box that she's going to get destroyed, re-traumatised. Is it to get a conviction for human trafficking? So we're looking for other charges. We can get organised crime charges, money laundering charges. So we have to think about it. We are looking at special measures, I mentioned earlier on, but to get special measures such as having video link, such as going from maybe a different area of the court behind a shield, that has to have a pre-trial. That has to go before the judge, and that could be a day-long pre-trial to justify why. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So, and again, it goes back to, I know Kevin mentioned earlier on, our constitution, and that's just the way it is. So that's how we have to adapt. But from an Irish perspective, the victim will always be centred. So for a successful prosecution, we must have great cooperation with the police. And we have that across Europe, and we have that especially in Latvia. As I said, the other operation at the minute is really successful. In this current case, we will have all the evidence from Latvia. No pressure, Tatiana, but we'll have it in the next 5 or 6 weeks. And once we have that, we are ready to arrest. And that will be a positive outcome for the victim. We have to have coordination meetings in Eurojust. Every country in Europe is different around the world. We've had cases with victims of trafficking in Romania. And Romania, it's a huge area, as we know. But Romania, they don't need to have the victim to go into the box. So we gathered a huge amount of evidence, and there was 10 people arrested in Romania on the foot of evidence we set from Ireland. Assistance from prosecutors that know the legislation is vital, and it has to be a multi-jurisdictional approach, following the advices of Eurojust, to work with other law enforcement agencies, that we can work to get the best objectives. And police will work together. We will work together for the common goal, and what we are looking for at the end of the day is justice for these victims, and especially these 2 Latvian girls. From the minute we got that letter, we're nearly there. We're not just there. We will hopefully have good news in the new year, but we're nearly there, and they'll finally get some justice. So, thank you.